With the way the world is going now, innovation and creativity is becoming increasingly important. And today, I'm going to teach you 6 ways on how to boost it. So, if you're watching this video, I assume you're here because you want to learn how to boost your creativity and innovation. And the truth is, I don't blame you because the modern economy is based on precisely that. AI, robotics, machine learning, and all the future technology, a lot of that is going to replace a lot of what humans can manually do. And it can even replace what we can do creatively. For example, imagine AI and robotics the way they are right now. They're like an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old can do some very simple things very quickly. AI and machine learning can do it much quicker and at scale. If you want to learn more about AI and machine learning, I actually did a podcast with Dr. Alistair Johnson from MIT, and in there we talk about the importance of innovation and creativity in the future and how to preserve your job. So essentially what we're facing is a situation where creativity and innovation is going to take center stage. So if you want to stay relevant in your work, you must leverage creativity and innovation. Otherwise, you really do face the prospect of becoming obsolete in the labor force. That's why it's very important to boost creativity and innovation, and today I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, before I get into the details on how to boost our creativity, I need to talk a little bit about what psychology tells us is the source of our creativity. Our creativity is basically based in our personalities, and this is found in what we call trait openness in the Big 5 personality traits. Trait openness is regulated by our dopaminergic system, which regulates the amount of dopamine we have to explore new things. So dopamine is kind of like the exploration, the creativity hormone. It regulates how much energy we have to explore new things, and when we run out of dopamine, we want to go back to the tried and true. And so essentially, personality is spread across a continuum. On one end of the continuum, we have those who are high in trait openness, and these are called the explorers. And explorers are those who have a lot of natural energy to search out new and novel things. On the other end of the spectrum, we have what we call the preservers. And these are people who have less energy to explore and try new things, and they prefer to stick to the tried and true. And in the middle, we have what we call the moderates, who can balance exploration and sticking to tradition. So just like any other of the Big 5 personality traits, trait openness is on a spectrum. And previously, I also did a video on trait agreeableness, which is whether people prioritize others or prioritize themselves. And I would actually recommend you to check them out, because in those videos, I talk about how you can make yourself less nice or how you can make yourself less abrasive and more of a team player. And just to be clear, I want to state that being an explorer or a preserver or a moderate doesn't preclude you from pursuing interests on the other end of the continuum. What it simply means is that you have less energy for it. This is not to say that explorers can't stick to the tried and true and that preservers can't go on exploration journeys. It's just what is the natural tendency that you have. So without further ado, here are the 6 steps on boosting your creativity. The first step is to actually do something that you love. And when I say that, it's essential because doing what you love boosts your intrinsic motivation. And this is found in a research that started in the 1960s by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, and they came up with a theory called self-determination theory. And self-determination theory is about what are those intrinsic motivators that drive you forward to do what you'd like to do. And basically they found 3 essential elements. The first one is autonomy, the second one is competence, the third one is relatedness. So the first one is autonomy, and autonomy basically means you get to pursue what you like to pursue. The second thing is competence, and competence is being good at something. The better you are at something, the more likely you are to do it. And the third one is relatedness. Having relationships with other people in doing that activity will drive you to do it more. And so from that theory, we know that people are motivated to do things that they're inherently interested in. So if you want to have more energy to explore and learn about something, it should really be something that you're intrinsically motivated to do. So doing something that you love is extremely important. The second recommendation I have is collaboration. And by collaboration, I would say find 2 or 3 people who are higher in trait openness and collaborate with them. They'll be able to give you feedback, they'll be able to give you advice, and through that, you'll be able to reflect on, hey, that's actually a pretty interesting way to do it. Hey, I never thought about that before. And just broadening your network to involve different people with different perspectives will stretch your own. The third recommendation that I have is to force yourself to step outside of your comfort zone. And I draw on Daniel Kahneman's work, Thinking Fast and Slow, for that. Essentially, what Daniel Kahneman says in his book is that our brain has a way of thinking fast, which is kind of like our instinctual brain, and on the other end, we have kind of the thinking slow brain, which is the logic part. So one thing you can do is to use your logical part of your brain to override your instinctual parts of your brain. So if your instinct is to go with the tried and true, one way to override that is to put yourself in situations that forces you outside of your comfort zone. By joining groups and activities that have different values, that really stretches you outside of what you would normally do. So to give you an example, in my 20s, almost a decade ago, I packed my bags and I moved to Korea, and I taught at an international school there. I was exposed and immersed in a culture that I'm not familiar with. So my ethnicity is Chinese, and going to Korea really stretched me to learn about a new culture that is similar but very different from my own. I spent 5 years there. I got married to my college sweetheart, and both my daughters were born there. And during those 5 years, I was stretched in ways that I couldn't imagine. Furthermore, I was working with colleagues who have a very international background. So I worked with Americans, I worked with Canadians, I worked with Kiwis, I worked with Koreans, I worked with just a very diverse background of people who I worked with, in both in terms of teachers and students, and that really stretched my worldview. So when I talk about using your logical brain to override your instinctual brain, it's basically put yourself in a situation that will stretch you in ways you cannot imagine otherwise. The fourth thing I would recommend is to borrow ideas from adjacent fields. So each field would have their own innovative ideas, but what is innovative in one field may not have been brought to another field. Creativity is essentially the cross-fertilization of ideas that allows for divergent and lateral thinking. So not only do you think up and down, you gotta think left and right, where you can borrow ideas from other places to contextualize into your own situation. So for example, in 2015, I published a paper in the Journal of Civil Society, which is a political science paper, but my background is in sociology. So I borrowed neo-institutional theory that was developed in the 1980s in sociology, and I brought it over to political science, and I used it in a Chinese context. This was basically never done before. And so by borrowing from neighboring fields, I was able to create something new and innovative. And that's really one very simple way to boost your creativity. The fifth recommendation that I would have is to unplug. And unplugging can come in two forms. One way is to walk. And when I say walk, is when you're in the middle of working and your brain is just stuck. You can just get up and take a stroll. And research from Stanford and Harvard Business Review shows that taking a walk, whether it's just walking to clear your mind or walking to have a walking meeting, can really boost your creativity and help you think outside the box, which is literally your office. The second thing I would recommend to help you unplug is to get more sleep. And the research behind sleep is very clear on how it boosts your creativity. So you can look at the work of Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley, and his research is basically on the impact of sleep. And in his book, Why We Sleep, he talks about how when we enter into sleep, when we enter into the fourth stage of sleep, which is the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, our brain basically paralyzes our body. And the reason why it does that is because the logical part of the brain actually is turned off, and the emotional, instinctual part of the brain just goes wild. So think of it kind of like the prison. The prison guards are gone and the inmates have gone wild. And that's also why your body is disabled, because you don't want to hurt yourself during that time. Getting sleep is very important because it helps you organize your thoughts, and everything that you've been grinding on throughout the day. Your brain will actually come up with solutions kind of subconsciously in your sleep. So getting more sleep is actually very important to boosting your creativity. The sixth recommendation I have is to give yourself constraints. And constraints, there's kind of a sweet spot. Too many constraints and you're suffocated. Too little and you're just running wild and roaming free. By giving yourself limitations, you're forced to step out of your comfort zone and be creative with what resources you have. And by doing that, you essentially attune yourself to what you have, what needs to be changed, and what can be fixed. And basically there's 4 P's to deal with that. There's project, product, people, and process. And by attuning yourself to one of these 4 P's, you really can come up with new ways to break through. So I hope this video has given you a lot of solid advice on how to boost your creativity. As I've said before, I've also made similar videos on how to increase your agreeableness or decrease your agreeableness based on the situation at hand. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like or a share. And of course, leave a comment below and let me know what else you want to listen about, because it really does help me in creating new content for you guys. And also, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Take care, everybody.